Welcome to Grace River Church online at home. We're so glad that you've chosen to join us here today. My prayer is that you're able to take a next step in your spiritual walk with God.
Yeah, and if this is your first time, we want to encourage you to text the word first to the number on the screen, just so we can say thanks for stopping by.
Yeah, let's dive into worship here today. I'm excited for this. This is going to be great. Let's dive in.
Hey, what's up? My name is Chris Eifel. I'm lead pastor here at Grace River Church, and I want to say thank you so much for watching online at home. We are wrapping up a series here on Mother's Day weekend called Imperfect Together, and today we're talking about an imperfect faith and the ability for us to be able to pass on our faith from one generation to the next. We're actually going to be looking at a character study today of Jesus' own mother. We're going to find out that she was not perfect, and it was her imperfect faith that we still talk about today. And man, it's just amazing to think about. I mean, can you imagine the responsibility of what it would mean to be the mother of Jesus? Man, the tension would be so high, so difficult. And so today, as we talk about imperfect faith, I think that you and I are going to be able to relate with this no matter where you're at today, whether you're a mom, whether you're a dad, whether you don't have any kids, it doesn't matter. We all have an imperfect faith because every single one of us are imperfect. In fact, at Grace River, we say this all the time, that there are no perfect people allowed. And so I think you're going to find a lot of relief. I think you're going to see that there's some clear next steps for you in this talk. And so I want to answer two questions today when it comes to faith. First of all, I want to answer the question, how is it that faith begins? And then where does faith lead? So where does faith start? And then also, once I am a person of faith, where does it lead me to? And so I want to start off with that very first question, which is this, is simply, where does faith start? And we're going to actually look at the life of Mary. We're going to find out that for Mary, faith started with a little bit of confusion. And I don't know if you've been there or not, where you've been confused about what God is up to in your life. You ever been there? Maybe you're there right now. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand because you're watching from home, or maybe you're driving in the car or whatever. But what I'm saying is every single one of us have been in a spot before where we've been confused about our faith. We've been confused about what God is up to in our lives. And can you imagine? I just want to take a moment. I think that sometimes we focus on Mary's life right around Christmas time. And so we're all swept up in Christmas. We're all swept up in the Christmas traditions. And now that we're in the spring, I think it's really important that we slow down for a second and go, well, what about Mary though? Like, what was it about her that made her so uniquely different? What about her story is just so uniquely different? I think from this vantage point in the spring, we can look at the life of Mary and go, wait a second, Mary was a virgin. Mary had never been with a man, and yet she's pregnant. Can you imagine the confusion? Can you imagine the confusion when an angel would come and visit you to let you know that you're pregnant with the Son of God? I mean, imagine that tension. Look at this in Luke chapter 1, verses 28 through 29. The angel Gabriel appeared to her and said, "Greetings, favored woman, the Lord is with you." I mean, in this moment, she has to be absolutely confused as the angel Gabriel is getting ready to tell her, hey, listen, you are pregnant. And clearly you're a virgin, and God did it. I mean, can you imagine the confusion in that moment? And so she's actually confused for two reasons. She's confused because she doesn't understand who she is, but she's also confused because she doesn't fully understand who God is yet. And man, I think that you and I have the same kind of identity problem, which we get confused because we don't really truly understand ourselves. We don't know really our own identity, who we are. And here's what I want you to know. You are a son or a daughter of the King. That's who you are. That's what your identity is in. And so once we settle up on who we are, then we can begin to dive into the fact of, man, who is it that God is? And man, when I get there, when I begin to understand who I am and who He is, the picture of faith in my life begins to get more and more clear whenever I understand my own identity, that I am a son or a daughter of the King. And when I understand who God is, that He's not some bearded man on a cloud ready to strike me down at a moment's notice when I mess up. That is not who God is. In fact, if you want to learn who God is, the nature and the character of God, the best thing that you and I can do is we can look at the life of Jesus, because through the life of Jesus, we can see the heart of God. We can see the heart of the Father through the actions of the Son. And so our problem with our faith, the reason why we're oftentimes confused, just like Mary, is we don't know who we are, and we don't know who He is. And so faith does start with some confusion. Us stepping out on faith, us trusting God with an area of our lives that we've never trusted Him with before, will always start with a bit of confusion, a bit of, man, God, I don't know what this looks like. I don't know what the future holds. The key, though, is that I would trust You, which leads to the second thing that faith starts with, which is questions. The key is you have to ask God questions and then you have to listen for an answer. We have to ask God questions, and I don't think that we're bad at that. We're not bad at asking God questions. When we have doubts, when we have questions, we're pretty good at asking God, what's up with this? What we're not good at is slowing down and actually listening to God for an answer. Look at this in Luke chapter 1, verse 34. Mary asked the angel, but how can this happen? I'm a virgin. So she has questions for God, right? This angel comes and visits her and says, hey, guess what? You're pregnant. And then what does she have? She's confused by this, but she also has questions. But here's the great thing about Mary is that Mary stuck around long enough to get her questions answered. And on your faith level, on your faith journey where you're at, I wonder if you would be willing to stick around long enough with this journey with God, to slow down long enough, to spend enough time with Him through prayer and through reading His Word and through being around other Christians, that you would spend enough time and actually wait it out and go, man, I want to hear what God has for me in my own life. And so Luke chapter 1, verse 37, here's the response of Mary once she has slowed down and really listened to what God was up to in her life. She says this, for with God, nothing shall be impossible. This is unbelievable. It's that she goes from being confused to having questions to coming to a place in her life where Mary discovered that God can make the impossible possible in her life. And man, I know you've got questions and I know you're confused about your faith. Like we've all been there, right? But man, would you slow down long enough and go, you know what? I'm going to pursue God in this. And so how is it that you listen to God, right? Are we looking for an audible voice from heaven? Are we looking for God to write something in the sky? Like, how is it that we can listen to God? Well, I think that's a threefold thing. I think that it starts with looking within you. So that's where it starts, and then it moves to looking around you, and then it moves to looking above you. Now, looking within you doesn't mean like self-help, but looking within you goes, hey, it's important that you slow down and experience enough silent moments and enough solitude for you to actually be able to hear God. I think we're so busy, man, we're so inundated with so many different things speaking into our lives, whether it's something that we're looking at on our phone, something that we're watching on TV, a conversation that we're having with a friend. And it's really easy sometimes to ignore looking within and go, man, what is it that's really missing in my life? And I think that's important for you to have a moment where you go, man, what's missing? In order for us to take the next step on the faith journey, we have to recognize that, listen, there is something incomplete about us. And what is that? And it starts with looking within. And then it goes to looking around you. Looking around you, go, man, there are some people in my life that are a little further down the road than me. And I can look around me and go, there are people that could help me on my faith journey. And man, if you don't have someone like that, I think it's really important for you to find a Bible church for you to plug into, whether it's Grace River or some other church in the community somewhere where you live. And man, connect with someone. Attend, show up early, stay late, hang out, right? And find a way to connect with somebody and look around you to go, there are people that have answers when it comes to faith. And then it's also important for you to obviously look above you, which is to look to the Father, to look to God. You can't find out the questions you have unless you slow down long enough to listen to what God has to say. And so where does faith start? Well, it starts with some confusion. It leads to questions. And then ultimately it comes to commitment. Faith starts with me being a little confused. Faith starts with me having some doubts and some questions, but then it ultimately moves to us making a commitment. And this is the problem for far too many of us. And I mean that like even with myself, is we are slow to commit to God. We're late adopters of the idea that I need to commit to Him. But I love what Mary does in Luke chapter 1, verse 31. Mary responded, I'm the Lord's servant. May everything you have said about me come true. What Mary's doing here is twofold. She's declaring that she's all in for God. I'm the Lord's servant. To be a servant of the Lord, it just simply means I'm going to do what He wants me to do. I'm going to go where He wants me to go. And I wonder if that's your commitment level today, that you would say, man, I've been confused and I've got some questions, but ultimately it comes to this idea that I'm not going to just be circumstantial with my faith. At some point, I'm going to cross the line and say, man, I'm going to commit my life and give my life back to the God who gave me His. It's only reasonable that we would do that. And so may everything you have said about me come true, she said. She's actually just speaking this into her own life to say, man, I can't wait to see what God does next. Is she saying, I'm going to trust God, and may everything you say come true. And so that's where faith starts, with some confusion, with some questions, and then ultimately with commitment. And so now we're going to talk, we talked a little about where faith begins. Let's kind of wrap up our time together by talking about where our faith leads. Like, what happens whenever I take a step of faith, and what does that mean? And so where does faith lead? Well, ultimately, I want you to know faith leads to problems. So sometimes we may think that if I step out on faith or live this life of faith, that I will live this problem-free, Hakuna Matata lifestyle. And what I want you to know today is that that's non-existent, that we will always have problems. But the problems that you will have as a result of a life of faith result in a reward that you would never have if you didn't. And so let's look at this in Matthew chapter 2, verse 13. So Mary and Joseph have this baby, right? They have this baby boy named Jesus, and ultimately, it's problems. I mean, look at this in verse 13. After the wise men were gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, and he said this, "Get up, flee to Egypt with the child and his mother." The angel said, "Stay there until I tell you to return, because Herod's going to search for the child to kill him." Now, Mary and Joseph both stepped out in faith. He decided to stay with Mary. She decides to have the baby, right? And there's this moment of like, okay, we're stepping out on faith. And you would think that this would be a problem-free life, right? But it wasn't problem-free. She's 8 months pregnant as they go to Bethlehem. As they're there, they're warned by an angel to not go home the same way, right? And so there was problems because Herod wanted to kill. He was threatened by Jesus and the authority of Jesus. He's threatened by this young baby. And so now he's going to kill all of these little boys as a result of it. What's really dramatic and crazy about all of this is that even though they stepped out on faith, they still had problems. And that's a lesson for us to learn, is that when we step out on faith, let's not be surprised when things don't go the way that we think that they should go, because ultimately God has a better plan. And so which set of problems do you want to live with is the question that I want to ask you. The kind that go with faith, or the kind that go with selfishness and your own pride. And so it's important that you recognize that I'm going to live with some kind of problem. I want to live with the problem that faith brings me, not the problem that selfishness and pride brings me, because those problems are always way more difficult. And so I'm not the perfect parent, and neither are you. And so we're not the perfect parent, but the good news is that God ultimately is. And there's a lot of relief in this. In fact, to continue on with this problem idea, Mary and Joseph actually lose Jesus at some point, which is crazy to think about. I mean, can you imagine being the parents of the Son of God and you lose him? Look at this in Luke chapter 2, verse 43. It says this, "After the celebration was over, they started home to Nazareth, but Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, and his parents did not miss him at first." Can you imagine that? They're traveling in this caravan, and they leave Jerusalem, and they leave Jesus behind, and they don't realize, look at this, it takes a day for them. Verse 44, "Because they assumed he was among the other travelers, but when he didn't show up that evening, they started looking for him among their relatives and their friends." I mean, what in the world? There's like an Amber Alert that goes out for Jesus. And I don't know if you've ever lost one of your kids, but I have. And there's this moment that happens where you feel like you are the world's worst parent in that moment. Like, how in the world did we lose Jesus? One time we lost Ella at a big 4th of July event, and there were thousands and thousands of people around. I'll never forget what happened. I was buying a lemonade, and I went to go pay for it. And as I grabbed my wallet out of my shorts pocket, I went to pay for this lemonade. I let go of her little hand. She was about 2.5 at the time. I let go of her little hand, and she bolted. And I went to pay, I got the lemonade, and I looked down, and she's not there. And I realized, oh my gosh. I immediately called my wife and said, "Hey, just out of curiosity, what's Ella wearing?" Like, I don't know, and then she knew in that moment that she was gone too, because you're not asking that question if she's standing right next to you. And so we get some cops involved and some different security people at this event. And then we look, and there's this main stage area for this 4th of July event that was probably about a football field away. And we looked, and she was down there at the very bottom dancing around with a group of crazy people. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that we found Ella. And you can imagine the relief that they would have felt whenever they found Jesus, right? But they were not perfect parents. And man, there's a lot of relief in that, I think. Mary and Joseph weren't the perfect parents. They were the parents of the Son of God, but they were still imperfect. And I want to give you room today as a mom or a dad, or maybe a future mom or a future dad, or as an aunt or an uncle, as someone that is helping the next generation. I want you to know the expectation is not that you're perfect, all right? But the expectation is that you become a person of faith, that your faith isn't a perfect faith, that you're passing on from one generation to the next. And so ultimately, faith leads to problems. And then also faith leads to surprises. So there's surprises that come whenever we step out on faith and live a life of faith. In John chapter 2, verse 3, it's a story of Jesus, is his very first miracle, turning water into wine. And what's really interesting about the life of Mary is here in Jesus' life, obviously as his mother, but because Mary is Jesus' mother, she's kind of along for the ride in all these really monumental moments of his life, right? So she's along for the ride, obviously for the birth announcement, because it's her getting told that he's going to be born. And then she's along for the ride, obviously for his birth, the night that the shepherds came to visit, and then later on the night that the wise men came to visit. And she's around for all of these moments. She's around for the moment where they lose him. And then she's around for the moment here at his very first miracle. And she's got this question. She says, the wine supply ran out during the festivities. So Jesus' mother told him, they have no more wine. And Jesus takes this moment, and we know what happens in this moment is he actually takes water and turns it into choice wine, which is unbelievable that he's able to do this. And it's just the fact that he is Jesus, that he is God. But here he is, and this leads to a surprise. And that's where faith ultimately leads. When we step out on faith, we'll be surprised at how God shows up. When we step out on faith, and even in our doubts, even in our confusion, even in our questioning of God, even with our commitment to God, we'll oftentimes be surprised at just how it is that God shows up. It's often way different than we think. And so that's where faith leads. Faith leads to surprises. Also, faith leads to opportunities. When we step out on faith, you and I get opportunities to go places that we'd never be able to go on our own, to do things that we'd never be able to do on our own. Faith ultimately leads to incredible opportunities. And so one heartbreaking opportunity that Mary had was she stood at the foot of the cross to see her son die on the cross. In John chapter 19, verse 25, standing near the cross was Jesus' mother. So man, how heartbreaking would that be to be the mother of Jesus and watch your son die? And so she was there for that opportunity. And ultimately, it really was this opportunity for her. Also, faith leads to purpose. We see that after Jesus dies on the cross, he resurrects, he ascends back to heaven. In Acts chapter 1, verse 14, Mary is also there with the formation of this early church. Let's look at what happens. They all joined together consistently in prayer along with the woman and Mary, the mother of Jesus, and with his brothers. So here's Mary. She's along for the entire ride from start to finish with Jesus' life. She's been on this faith journey. And has it been perfect? We know that it hasn't been because she is not a perfect person. But what we do know is that now she has a new purpose. She's a part of this new church. And I want you to know today, if you lack purpose in your life, if you lack meaning in your life or significance in your life, I want you to know that God loves you, he cares about you, and you can live a life of purpose and significance no matter what you're up against, no matter what trauma has happened in your life, no matter what difficulty has happened in your life. God has a purpose and a plan for your life, and he doesn't want to waste one single scar in your life. And so I like to close every sermon with some really clear next steps, and I've got 3 of them for you to think about today. Would you first of all identify where you're at on the journey of faith? Like, would you just slow down and go, okay, here is where I'm at when it comes to my relationship with God? Maybe you're confused like Mary was. Maybe you've got some questions, and that's okay. Or maybe you've made a commitment. Like, would you identify where you're at? Are you confused? Do you have some questions? Have you made a faith commitment? Like, where are you at on the journey? And then what's keeping you from taking the next step? So if you're confused about who God is and who you are, what's standing in the way? Is it the opinions of other people? Is it just a lack of knowledge? Like, what is it that is standing in the way between you and God? Is it your reputation or your pride? Like, identify what it is that's keeping you from God. Identify that, and then let's break through that barrier. Let's commit our lives back to the God who gave us his life. And I want to give you the chance right now to do that. Like, if you've never surrendered your life to him, if you've never made him the Lord and the leader of your life, you can do that right now. In fact, let's just do this for a moment. Would you just bow your heads and close your eyes, no matter what your commitment level is to God? Maybe you're listening today and you've never committed your life to him. You've got some serious confusion. You've got some serious questions for God. That's okay. You don't have to have it all figured out. But today, if you're ready to make Jesus the Lord of your life, ready to commit your life to him, you could pray a prayer just like this. God, thank you for sending your only son for me. And God, in my life, I've had moments where I've doubted you. God, I've had moments in my life where I've fallen short and made mistakes. And God, there are things in my life that I feel guilty about, that I have regret for, and I know those things are sin. And so God, today I believe that you sent your only son for all of that stuff in my life. And I not only believe it, but God, I also confess you to be the Lord and the leader of my life. God, today I pray that you would change me from the inside out. Thank you for making me a new person and for making me a Christian, from saving me from my sins. Help me not to live for myself any longer, but to live for you. God, thank you. In Jesus' name we pray all this. Amen. Man, if you just prayed that prayer for the first time, I just want to encourage you to text the word yes to this number on the screen, 636-336-2475. That number again, 636-336-2475. Just simply text the word yes to that number. And man, one of the really big faith commitment steps that you can take is the commitment of baptism. And so if you're interested in taking a next step of getting baptized, you can actually go to our website at graceriver.cc/next steps. And on that link, you can actually sign up to become baptized. We're actually baptizing May 15th. And so Sunday, May 15th, and all three services in person, 8:30, 9:45, and 11 o'clock. We're going to be publicly baptizing people. Water baptism is a great way to come out with your faith and to let people know that you're committed to Jesus. And we talked about those three levels of faith, right? The level of questioning, really the level of confusion, and then questions, and then commitment. And today you may be listening and go, man, I've never been baptized and I need to do that. And so I just want to encourage you to go to our website, click on Next Steps, and you can sign up from there and take that next step of being baptized. It's a great way for you to celebrate what God did in your life through saving you. And so I want to say again, thank you so much for watching online. Man, it's going to be an awesome couple weekends coming up here at Grace River Church. And I hope you join us for one of our in-person services, 8:30, 9:45, and 11 o'clock every single Sunday. Hope you have an awesome day. Can't wait to see you soon. Thanks.
I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up till I lay my head, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire. Darkest night, you are close like no other. I've known you as a father, I've known you as a friend, and I have lived in the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. In my life Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Oh, your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. When my life laid down and surrendered now, I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Come on, lift your voice. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I'm gonna sing. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I'm gonna sing the goodness of God. Yeah, I'm gonna sing the goodness of God.
Thank you so much again for joining us online today. We hope that you were encouraged by today's message. Here at Grace River, we worship in 3 ways: through singing, through the hearing of God's word, and through giving back to the God who's given us everything. If you feel inclined to give today, you can do so by texting Grace River to the number on the screen.
Yeah, and I want to personally invite you to one of our 3 in-person services here at Grace River, 8:30, 9:45, and 11 o'clock. We hope to see you soon. Have a great week.